can't see you guys for whatever reason, but we're getting attendees in here, so it appears to be going live. Hey, everybody. Thanks for attending our webinar. I'm Nick with Kinetic, and today we're hosting a webinar about tech adoption. It's a great topic, and we've got a great panel, so I'm really looking forward to this. As some background, a major problem for tech companies isn't always the sale itself, but gaining adoption after the sale. So we wanted to put together a webinar to discuss the various obstacles to successful adoption. Our general structure for this webinar is to walk through the process from product development up through the sales process and then training, kind of discussing the different ways that each of the areas can impact adoption rates. And then we'll kind of move on to some more overarching questions about tech adoption and have a Q&A at the end. Ideally, this should be useful information for both tech companies and their customers. So from there, let's jump into some intros here. Ryan, you want to kick things off?
Sure. Thanks, Nick. So Ryan Rogers, I'm a 20+ year veteran in the logistics space. Background is a couple of different stops spent a lot of time at US Express. I'm a local Chattanooga guy. So I was at US Express for about 16 years, then took a gap year at age 40, did some consulting with a handful of companies, RMIS, Comdata, and Trucker Path when they were starting up, and stayed relevant in the industry, and then ended up transitioning to Amazon. So I led procurement at Amazon for truckload out of Atlanta with a team out of Seattle. Loved it, and then ended up in a transition to Covenant Transport as Chief Transformation Officer. So background there between tech, innovation, M&A, strategic planning, things like that, and then also managed their truckload brokerage there. And then recently transitioned from Covenant and started up my, kind of scratched the itch as an entrepreneur and started my own business, TextLocate.com.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Ryan. Sorry. Bain, we are on to you.
Awesome. Robert Bain, but I go by Bain. I tend to use my last name because it sounds a lot cooler. 15+ years in the industry. I've been around a lot of different facets of it from the asset side. I started my career at CRST out in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Moved to the Chicagoland area. I helped start up some brokerages, built those up. I also was the general manager for a company called VP Express up in Waukegan, Illinois, part of the Visual Pack companies. Spent a few years at Uber Freight, helped kind of build that business out and helped launch it into kind of the monster it is today. Also spent some time on the tech side working with some more tech forward companies like Shipwell, and then also had some time as a director of operations at a couple other brokerages out in the western suburbs here in Chicago. Currently, I'm an industry consultant for Carrier Direct. Utilize all my various experiences to kind of help our clients as they grow and transform their businesses. And I also have the awesome honor of being the strongest man in logistics.
Yes, you do. And I had to throw that on the slide.
Gotta throw it in there.
Gotta. All right, Chris, your turn.
Hey everybody, Chris Beckham. I'm the VP of Operations here at Freight Plus, another 20+ year veteran in the industry. About half of those years were with Adidas and Reebok. And what's interesting is that the first 20 years of my experience were actually on the shipper side of the desk. Made the transition over to the consulting and then 3PL space about 3 years ago here at Freight Plus. So it's been an interesting dynamic leaping from one side of the desk to the other. So my main responsibilities here are to oversee all of our transportation operations. We do have our operating authority to act as a brokerage, but our core business is around managed transportation solutions for our clients. So happy to be a part of the panel here today, and thanks, Nick, for bringing me in.
Yeah, of course. All right. So kind of moving into the actual substance of the webinar, let's start from the beginning. What are some important things to keep in mind while developing the product itself that'll help ensure adoption? And Ryan, you're kind of either going through this process or just finished going through this process. What would you, I'll start you off with this one.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So that's a good question. I think relevant, obviously, for us right now. We just launched about 3 weeks ago. So what was important, obviously the functionality has to work and there's got to be a need for the actual product, I feel like. And then from there, it's just what I've got, when I do demos and things like that right now, what I'm getting is a lot of feedback about simplicity. People are really excited about products that are addressing a specific niche, and the simplicity and ease of use has been tremendous for me from a response. So that way, make it intuitive. I know that it's kind of a little bit of a cliche with the app with the iPhone, but the iPhones and a lot of technology now, you buy a new computer, it doesn't really come with an instruction book. You can kind of Google it or look at things, quickly get response. So it's really important to make it very intuitive, that it's easy for the user, easy for both parties. So our specific product, Text Locate, that I started, really identifies, it's kind of in the visibility space with one-time locations. So what it does is it sends a text out to a driver requesting a location update. So what I had to do was make sure I could make it functionally easy for the freight broker using the online platform, and the ease of adoption with a driver receiving the message. So keeping it simple, keeping as much information as you possibly can on the front, right on the front screens, makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think that point about keeping it simple is huge. Bane, do you have anything to add to this one?
I mean, the two biggest things I think that you mentioned were simple and intuitive. The other one is the focus, right? Text Locate has a singular focus. It focuses on location and check calls, and being very good at that, and then starting to expand out versus trying to be all things to all people. I think that's a big part of tech overall, especially as you're bringing in new items or something that you're trying to automate. Simple and intuitive is huge. You mentioned Apple and iPhone. One of Apple's original goals with the iPhone was that a new person who had no understanding of the Apple ecosystem, what it was at that time, could basically up and running and sending text messages and downloading apps on their interface within 30 minutes. And I think that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. You may not be able to necessarily do that with all tech, but something to keep in mind is that you want to have something that is very unique, very powerful, but very easy to use.
Yeah, I would agree. And the idea that you mentioned around the scope creep, Robert, is really important, because that can be a tough challenge at first, because you get customers on the phone and they're like, well, can you do this? We have the potential, we can do that on the roadmap, but to stay true to what you're very first starting, I think, is really important too, and then grow into it as adoption, as it makes sense for your business to grow as well.
So that's huge.
Yeah. Chris, do you have anything to add to this one?
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, going in the Wayback Machine as somebody who would have been a user of this product, and I'll kind of dovetail on that in a minute. I think that simple, straightforward approach where it's solving a specific problem is super attractive, right? It's tech can be a little bit scary to some people who have not been exposed to tech in the past. So having something that is going to solve a very specific, direct problem, to me, is the absolute right strategy to take. And from a personal standpoint, us at Freight Plus, we are moving forward with Text Locate. So we are going to be, we identified an issue in our own business process where we're making tons of check calls today. And this is going to solve a piece of that problem for us, where it frees up capacity for my team to be more productive, more efficient, and essentially drive more volume over to Freight Plus. So, from that standpoint, we couldn't agree more. It's a great product, and it does solve a very specific problem for us.
Look at that, closing deals on webinars. Nice job.
Right?
Yeah, I didn't even know that, by the way. So thank you.
That's awesome. Even better.
Awesome. Well, hey, we'll use that as a segue into the next question here. And Ryan, I'm going to ping you for this one too, if I can get my computer to work. There we go. So, after product development, before you start pitching to a prospect, what are some other things you can do to improve adoption rates?
Well, I think so before we started pitching, I think the number one that I was really working on was, how do I deliver or be able to give the product for free? And I know most people, or they're not insinuating, but some people cannot do that. It may not work. But we were able to build an account that you can sign up for free. There's no credit card. Literally, it's free every month. And it has people would say, oh, it's just a way to get you into it. Well, yeah, it is, but it's also a free product. If you don't have a large use case, you can use the product as much as you want for free. Like, for example, it gives you 3 users and 20 pings. But it gets people started. People want to test drive things. I know from my adoption in the past, I wanted to see what something looks like. And we've actually had great success over the past. We launched, like I said, 3 weeks ago. Over the past week, we've probably had roughly 100+ people sign up that I did not have any conversation with, that literally just went in and signed up for the product. They signed up for the free account. They're actually playing with it, testing, and see if it meets their needs and use case. So before we launch, I want to make it easy, simple, but I want to have people be able to have a way to actually not just see a presentation or a PowerPoint or a video, but wanted to actually let them experience the product, that they could interact with using it themselves with their phone and the platform.
I think that's great. Let me ask you this. Do you think that changes if you're a new company versus a more established company? Do you think the need to have a free version or like a pilot period changes over time?
It probably could. Like as you become more bigger in the industry and become more well-known and people are giving you referrals, you may or may not need that. But for me, I don't want to ever give that up, because the industry is so large and there's new players coming into it all the time. There's new brokers getting signed up, new logistics parties that, again, I think they want to live test it. And I think that makes a huge difference to still have it, even if you have to limit the feature and the content, because there's cost associated. When people think, oh, you have this nice web platform, it can't cost anything. It's still like the connections with our GPC, Google Cloud, GCP platform, all of our different administrative tools. It's not quote free. It does cost. So, but if you're able to focus on features, then I'm starting to see that more and more, where people have, let's say, a wide breadth and depth of products, but they at least give you a free product to get you kind of to be able to use it and get familiar with it to make sure that it meets your business case.
Perfect. Bain or Chris, anything to add to this one?
I think you touched on it a little bit, but I think just understanding the addressable market, with whatever your product is going to be, obviously with a simple solution and something that's tackling a single problem, you want to make sure that you're going to have an addressable market that you can actually go to. I'll use TextLocate as the example. Huge market when it comes to 3PLs. Eventually, I'm sure spilling into the shipper space, and maybe there's some other applications as well. But again, if you have a large addressable market, that's going to be one of the things you want to understand. If you don't have a large addressable market, it's not that you can't still go to market, is understanding how you're going to get in front of those people that your product matters to.
Yeah, no, I think
Great point.
Great point. Definitely some great points.
And Ryan, just out of curiosity, when you're deploying a new product like you just have, how are you defining what success looks like after that product hits the market, so to speak?
For me, success is a couple things. Obviously, getting people to paid accounts is the ultimate goal, to get somebody where they're using it. But to me, I find a tremendous amount of success just people getting awareness, getting exposure to the product, getting people thinking about it and it being relevant. And then getting those free accounts. They mean so much to me, because I've come from a larger corporations in the past, and I like that we're able to offer a product that a small startup could use, just like us. They could use right out of the gate, very affordable. So getting the free version signed up, to me, is a big success factor. And then we've got to win their business. That makes all the difference in the world.
Cool. So since you talk about winning their business, let's transition into this. What are some best practices for promoting adoption during the actual sales process? Because this is something that I talk to a lot of tech companies about, in terms of, so they sold to one person and they convinced that one person to buy it, but at the same time, you have the rest of this organization that's also, or the actual seat level users that need to use this. What are some things to do to promote adoption during that sale? Who did I pinged for this? Bain, sorry.
Yeah, it's me. Well, I mean, you can always use the or else method. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but that's always an option to say, hey, use this or else. What I would typically say when you're going through the sales process is going through the entire organization. Look at, where is this technology going to touch? Using, for instance, like a TMS system. Who all does this touch? If you're in a brokerage, for instance, you're going to be touching your, whether you have a buy-sell model, your carrier sales, your customer sales, you have cradle to grave, your brokerage team. It's going to touch all of them. It's going to touch your accounting team on some level. It may touch your marketing team if you have one of those. Who all does this touch? And then how does this affect their job? What does this do to their day-to-day? And really, what does it give back to them? Is it going to give back time? Is it going to give them back data that they didn't have previously? And so selling through the organization and understanding their process is going to be really huge. And then where your product actually slides in there and makes their life easier. But again, it starts with yes, you got the first person convinced. Now, where else does your product touch, and how is it going to make everybody else's life easier? So that instead of trying to close and then resell everybody once you're in, you've already got all the leadership bought in, and now it's time to start working with the C-level individuals.
Yeah, and Chris, let me ask you, because you guys have a brokerage component to your business. Is this something you've experienced while onboarding tech? Is it more helpful when people sell through the organization, like Robert was just talking about?
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it. So, even though we're selling a service in terms of managed transportation solutions, data and tech is a huge piece of that. And it's really the C-level folks are the ones that are easiest to convince, because we can quantify the upside, whether it's material money savings or just freeing up capacity in terms of labor. So those folks can be repurposed to do some, higher level, higher value stuff. But what we found is that you need to really engage everybody in the beginning of the process, all the way down to the operators. Because if you don't get the buy-in there, to Bain's point, they can drop the hammer, the folks, and just say, hey, you got to use this, and that's it. But if you don't have that, it's going to significantly impact the whole deployment, the go live, everything, and just the ongoing issues. So you got to make sure that they are part of that process, that they've bought in, and they're clear and comfortable on the value that's being driven from this product.
Yeah, Ryan, anything to add to that?
No, just to reiterate it, that's actually part of the way we design the product. Is we looked at how do we make sure that there's a product that the seat level user would actually enjoy. So if you have a strategic conversation about the need at this strategy team level, and then the seat user want to be able to use it, that's what's extremely important. If you can help solve problems. So with Text Locate, well, I've kind of deemed it the superpower of check calls. So basically the seat level user, it makes their job easier and more efficient. So when somebody comes in and says, hey, we've got this particular product, start using it. And again, making it easy, simple, and allowing them to have use of that makes their job easier, then they're going to adapt to it and really respond, really jump on board. And then the other thing is we actually developed it. We're seeing some really high performing brokers signing up for it themselves, because they kind of run it like their own business. So they can, the point of entry, our entry point for a small brokerage office is $100 a month. So if you've got a high performing broker and they don't want to, they won't want to do all the check calls themselves, then for them, they can pay $100 and have this tool to be their superpower as well. So then it can be moved up a little bit. People can sign up for the free accounts and even take it to management and say, hey, we found a really scrappy, cool, simple product that we think you guys should sign up for the rest of the floor. I've been testing it out, using it myself, and it's working really well. And at the price points that we have, being subscription based and being monthly, it helps because your risk is extremely low to bring it on board. So if you can work a tool that can be both beneficial for the seat level and from a strategic point of view, I think that combination is really strong.
Yeah, and I'll add a quick thing here that Robert, I think you touched about a little bit. Understanding their process as it relates to your product. As a ridiculous example, Ryan, like if you're working at the broker and like they just don't track their loads, right? Like they've opted out, they don't care, they don't want to track anything, just set it and forget it and just be about their business.
Yikes.
Well, like no, right? Yikes. But like knowing that impacts whether or not it's even gonna be a worthwhile product for them. Or if it's like a sourcing or capacity management type tool. If the broker you're talking to is relying exclusively on a load board and all they want to do is post it to a board, take inbound calls, and just move on with their life and just cross their fingers and hope, well, your tool might not even be a good fit for them, right? If that's their end goal, if all they really want to do, if their process is just revolving around posting loads, it's going to be a much more, in my opinion, at least, involved process to get people on board with that product, just because it doesn't fit into their existing process at all.
Yeah, I would say that's
for that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great comment. So again, your product can't be everything to everybody depending on how they use it. But when they get in a bind, my product's very easy to spin up. If they get a potential issue, or if there's a freight that gets lost or set downtime for multiple days, they may look at this as an option, as another point of contact. But it would be tough to think of somebody that's truly got their business hat on that does not want to track any freight. Even if you want to ping just a couple of messages a day or something, because drivers are professional, but the point being is situations occur, flat tires occur, breakdowns occur with transmissions, engines, anything can happen. They could get sick. They could be, feeling bad. So it's good to have that knowledge because customers get frustrated, but they're people just like you and I. And if you give them as much proactive information as possible, then they can make decisions on how they manage their business as well. So what the point really, the long-term benefit of Text Locate is to have the location information so that you can get that information, check off the boxes that everything's good. And if there is something with a situation, then you're being proactive to resolve situations than reactive.
Yep, I agree with all of that. I'm going to jump into the next question real quick here. Bain, this is actually a point you brought up during our last webinar that kind of prompted me to even want to do this one. How do you promote adoption during the initial onboarding? And like, I know you're real passionate about training and how to train people correctly on things and best practices there. Have at it. Now's your time to shine.
Sure. Thank you. And so when we say training, that is not just physical culture, but also training when it comes to your professional life too. So when you look at training, and especially initial onboarding, I'm looking at training on the why. Why are we doing this? What is this product doing? What is it fixing? What is it? What isn't it? I think that's another big thing that you really need to, and what we see with our clients is you have to explain to people what a technology or an initiative is not doing. So, this is not to cut people's roles. This is not to reduce headcount. This is to increase your effectiveness. This is to give you time back. And that's the biggest thing that you typically see with technology specifically is what time is it giving back to you? What is your time worth? And how do you make it more valuable? And you do that with, taking these redundant tasks and ones that can be done, automatically and looking at what your time is worth versus what the cost of that is. That's how you kind of determine the value, right? And so starting with the why. Why is this important? Why are we doing this? How does it impact you? What the change management is going to be? And then how it makes the individual more effective and better at their job, and then how they can focus on those higher value activities.
Chris, I see you nodding a lot over there.
Yeah, it's exactly it. And we see this all the time as we onboard new clients. Especially at the operator level, people are a little hesitant on, what does this mean for me? And, with our service and our technology, it's exactly that. It's to free up that capacity. So, a typical client of ours may have a team that's pounding the phones every day, calling local terminals, answering that WMS question, where's my stuff? The technology solves a lot of those problems, but technology will break. And we act as an extension of that, of their transportation operations team. So we're able to pick up some of that heavy lifting. There's no such thing as true non-value add work, right? Or at least I'd like to think that. But there is higher value added work that somebody could be doing within that company. One of our recent engagements with a client, they are super hyper focused on the customer experience, which is awesome. It's great. Obviously it's a super approach to take. And our communication to them was, you have all these folks that are doing this, but because you're so focused on that customer experience, wouldn't it be better to have these folks spending more time with customers to go through that experience and how they can make it even better than how it is today? So it's just, I couldn't agree more with what Bain's saying here.
You had me lifting.
So Bain, let me poke a little more into it.
Sure.
When you say training on the why, like what are some things from a broker's perspective that need to be conveyed like to individual users to explain to them that why? Is it exclusively the time, or do you drill deeper into like, you're going to book this many more loads per day, this much more revenue, extrapolate that over the course of a month, year, whatever? Like what else goes into that?
Sure, that's a great question. So the why is the start, and the time, I believe, is one of the biggest ones. One of the reasons why we employ technology is to leverage our time better. And so then, you hit it on the head, extrapolating now, depending on what the role is. If somebody is on the finance team, how many more invoices can you process? How much more quickly can you ingest this, and can you reduce your order to cash? If you're on the carrier sales side, how many more loads can you book? If you're on the client sales side, how many more clients can you get in front of now that you have this technology? We'll use Text Locate as the example. You have a version of visibility that you can now take to your clients, and you can go to market with, saying, we have visibility as many shippers are requesting. And so now we can penetrate different markets. And so what does it allow you as far as additional market opportunities, direct sales opportunities, and then how do you make the job more efficient? So it starts with time and then it extrapolates to the role, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. And I think it's a huge point. Ryan, like in your experience in brokerages, does that kind of align with what you've seen in terms of how to get like individual users on board? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I went on mute, but yes, everything that's mentioned before I did see. What I will say from spending a lot of time thinking about transformation in my prior role, one thing that I would add to this, the biggest obstacle is first just getting over the mindset that will you use a new product? You can give them, I mean, I think my product's great, personal opinion, of course, because I'm promoting it and building it and developing it. But the reality is, until somebody, they may even go, hey, that's really cool, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. So I have a very relevant kind of story that I like to share that is interesting from a technology perspective. So we had a last location, we had a brokerage office that we had really good hardware, software, technology as far as productivity standpoint, emails and things like that. And I had to force change a little bit with Simple, and Ryan Schreiber's listening, he knows this story is I had to literally take a printers off the floor because people wouldn't quit using them. And I'd be like, why aren't you? They would go over and they would print load confirmations, and then they would get the load confirmations and go key it back in the system where they have like 3 monitors, 2 plus their laptop. So getting, you don't want to have to force people, but sometimes you have to say, hey, please use this. And then they fall in love with the product. And in this case, it took about 2 weeks from once everybody was like extremely mad at me and wanted to, lock me out of the building, to the point that they were like, oh, I see now, this is so much easier. It just kind of, you change that behavior. So you don't want to have to force things, but if you're willing to take the time, because usually when you try something new, it takes time to learn. It takes time to adapt. So it's not that it's going to save you instant time, like immediately. You got to adapt to it. You got to start using it. And then once you're using it for a short period of time, then you find the efficiency. It becomes natural. But people like to stay with their habits, and they kind of get in that method and say, okay, I got a method of how I do it, and I don't want to change that because it's effective and it's always worked for me. But you got to be willing to have take a mindset of being open-minded to give it a chance. And sometimes you do things and it isn't better, but if you're willing to try, you'll find a lot more opportunity.
So where do you draw the line in terms of like when do you start implementing forced adoption, right? Like at what point do you cross that bridge and take all the printers off the floor?
Well, when you ask nicely for months and months, and then you finally give up and you're like, okay, we got to force this adoption. But I think it just depends on the situation. I mean, that one's a silly one and it's easy because the downside was not a huge risk. But I do think that you have to kind of take features away sometimes if you need to adjust. Like, for example, we had the experience of transitioning to Office 365. We ended up having to take it off people's desktops. They just would not change the behavior. So there are times, and I think you just got to gauge like how often, how close you are with the group, making sure, number one, that you've had enough time to vet that the product actually does work. Because if you take something away from them and it really is a negative, then they're going to get fed up and they could leave. They could get super frustrated. You could actually slow down productivity, things like that. But it's tough. So I don't know the right answer of where is that line. You just have to figure that out for yourself, depending on the product and the type users that you have and people and their openness.
Yeah, it makes sense. That would be a case by case thing. Bain or Chris, anything to add on this one, or should we move on to the next question, which is similar, honestly?
I think it's a huge point that you make, Ryan, is ensuring, and this is on the prospect or client side, ensuring the product does work, whether it's via a demo, whether it is a freemium type trial, whatever it may be. That's a big thing when you look at all the different, like the VC money that's coming in. People see dollar signs that they're building products that may sometimes be incomplete, and it is the onus is on the prospect to ensure that the product is going to do what it says it's going to do. That's why I mentioned earlier, focusing on a task and on a solution, and making sure that you're very, very good at doing that. Because if you're not able to actually solve those problems, once it gets to that implementation, then everything hits the fan.
Hey, Nick, I don't know if you're looking at the chat, but there was a question popped up out there that I think we should look at. It says, do you feel there is a sweet spot in terms of days, weeks, months for full adoption before the excitement of the new technology dies off? Yeah, I think with anything, the newness can die off quick. I don't know that there's a specific sweet spot in my perspective. I mean, hopefully you're giving a tool that works for them and is effective. So they may not be as excited about it, but it becomes a normal everyday use. I'm probably not as excited about upgrading my next iPhone, but I do it because it is functionally, it works, it's everything I need. So I think once something's new and hot, it definitely is exciting for a period of time, but I don't know how long that lasts. I think, for example, we're going to look at and evaluate our product, and as we get more use case and needs, then we can obviously add additional functions. So I think if you keep innovating and growing your product, keeping it very simple though, I think makes a lot of sense, but having some new features that can come into will help keep there's some excitement to it. I don't know if you guys, other people have some thoughts there as well.
Bane, Chris, any thoughts on if there's a sweet spot?
To me, it kind of depends, right? It depends on the technology. It depends on what need you're trying to service. So it's a little bit difficult to answer, but we see over time as we onboard new clients and we get them introduced and integrated with the technology that in the beginning there's definitely a pretty steep learning curve and a little bit of in some cases passive, sometimes active resistance to utilizing the technology. Now the good thing is we end up operating that on their behalf. So whether they are active or passive in terms of participation isn't quite as relevant, but the more active that they are, the more support that just gets generated in-house. So, we expect some reasonable participation and adoption within, the first few weeks of deploying that technology. And with some, we do tend to see some longer tails, so to speak, with some of our other customers, but it's a little bit all over the place.
Cool. No, I think those are great points. If anybody else has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll do my best to multitask and read them at the same time. That one got by me, so thanks for that, Ryan. Here, let's jump into our next kind of point here that relates to all the training we were talking about. How important is ongoing training and monitoring usage? And again, Bane, I had it kind of tagged to have you kick this one off. What are your thoughts on this one?
If I had to put it in one word, huge. It's absolutely imperative that there's ongoing training and monitoring usage. The reason being is because you can't understand adoption if you're not watching it. And then sometimes the issue with adoption is not necessarily understanding the why, it's understanding how to use it. There are many, we mentioned simple products, but occasionally products and technology they have some nuance and some complexity to them. And so on making sure that individuals fully know how to deploy the technology can then lead to higher adoption simply because they know what to do. A great case in point, my grandmother is 96 years old. We bought her an iPad so she could video conference with her great grandchildren, and she would not use it. It would sit just on the charger for months, literally months at a time, until we went and showed her how to physically use it. And now my kids will get phone calls at 8 o'clock in the morning because of course she's older and gets up early, and their great grandmother wakes them up. But she now knows how to use it, so she's adopted the technology fully.
No, that's great. And Chris, what are your thoughts on this in terms of monitoring usage and having ongoing training for people who are ideally using this tech?
Yeah. And for us, I'll kind of pivot because I've always been talking about it from a Freight Plus onboarding a new customer, a new client. Internally, we are also the users of quite a bit of technology. And we try to be pretty methodical in looking at the technology and identifying what problem it's going to solve. And then internally, we set up repetitive training sessions for our folks to ensure that they are using it. So we're monitoring it internally to make sure that we do have full adoption within the team, but then just providing that ongoing training. And it also gives the users the forum to come back and give us feedback on maybe how we can work with whatever technology it is to make it a little bit better, and make it a little bit more efficient for our folks here.
Yeah, I think that in my experience, one of the more important parts of having ongoing training is that that first training often doesn't cut it. People forget stuff. right? How much of the initial training are people actually going to remember? Like 20% of it a week later, if that.
That's
I think there's an
generous.
actual, I think there's an actual statistic that I just don't know right now in terms of actual retention for being shown things once. But like in order to get people to actually understand the product and like retain everything about it, you need to show them multiple times throughout an extended period of time. And I think Ryan, yeah, just because you showed them once doesn't mean you've trained them. I think that's a very similar comment right there. Ryan, you just popped off mute. Anything to say on this one? It's called the forgetting curve. Ryan Schreiber.
Yeah, yes, as far as ongoing training, I think it's obviously depends on the tool of how much you need as far as new training and new features. So giving awareness when you do add new features and promote that, but monitoring the usage, I think, is very important. Like, for example, we're a monthly SaaS-based product and no contracts. So it's going to be critical that we monitor the usage, because if the usage starts falling down, we need to figure out the why, and make sure that we're educating, coaching. It could be as simple as, hey, we had a couple of the people that used it that quit and left, and we forgot to set up the new people. I mean, it can be something as simple as that. So having that, that customer experience is important, and the follow-up of, as you see those stats changing, that you're, and sometimes their business model may change, and you may lose a customer, and that's okay if it happens, if it's not relevant to their needs. But if it's a matter of opportunities that we can solve, then we need to monitor that usage and solve those specific issues.
Let me ask this: what kind of, so just from a customer success standpoint, like what kind of cadence do you use in terms of like continuing to train people and continuing to monitor usage of it? Is it just a completely ongoing thing? Do you have specific like weekly, monthly check-ins to do additional training? I'll kind of open that up to anybody. Very case specific.
It is going to be tech specific. There may be some things that are much simpler, and you may not necessarily need the long-term ongoing every single month. We got to do a check-in. We've got to do a call every quarter. There are going to be some that are going to require even, more frequency than that, where I'll use a TMS as an example, where it's going to touch so many different parts of your business, where you're going to need to make sure that you have very consistent and ongoing training for the individual, because one, the TMS is going to evolve, hopefully, if you're building technology right, and you have to be able to train folks, so not so they get things right, but so they can never get them wrong, if that makes sense. And that's a much more robust training cycle, and is going to require a lot more touch points. Whereas something that maybe focuses on a single task, you may need a few initial trainings, we'll say 3, just as a round number, and then you're able to start parsing out additional touch points just to check in on users and what the adoption rates are going to be. It does depend on the complexity of the technology.
Perfect. So for the past probably half hour here, we've been talking a lot about this from the perspective of a tech company. What's the role of the customer in ensuring adoption? Like, what do the brokers, carriers, and what's their role in making sure that they get adoption of products? And Chris, I have you tagged for this one. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so we want to make sure that the customer is part of the entire process. So, we will hold as many training sessions as need be. We push out tons of SOPs and documentation, just YouTube videos on, if you need to do this, then here's a quick video that you can click on. But we want to make sure that from C-level all the way down to the operators, that everybody's been part of a collaborative process. And what we ask of the team is, when they make a commitment to the service, to the technology, that they are reiterating the same message that we've all committed to internally. Now, we can provide plenty of measurements saying, hey, from a user standpoint, we aren't seeing a lot of activity, which again is okay based on our model. But we do ask them to commit to have the same level of commitment that we do throughout the entire onboarding process. So, I think that they do have a very critical role in ensuring that we're all kind of in lockstep, we're all nodding our heads at the same things, and we're all walking in the same direction. So I think that they do have a very critical role in ensuring that the product is, once it's deployed, does have a high adoption rate internally.
Yeah, and here, Bain, I'll ask you, you're a consultant, you spend a lot of time talking to brokers and carriers about technology and their internal operations. Is this something you ever address with them in terms of I mean, it's a two-way street. It's a relationship, right? It's not exclusively on the freight tech company to make sure you're using this product. What
Correct.
do you tell people? Is this something you come across? And if so, what are the expectations for and the actual user of the tech?
A great question. We do see, with our clients that we'll do tech strategy and we'll look at something overarching, we'll look at individual items, but really what it comes down to is once you've determined what the tech is that you want to invest in, whether that is going to be something like visibility, whether it's going to be automation, whether it's going to be something more holistic, the team has to be fully bought in. So we talked earlier about selling through the organization. That is really where, if your team is saying yes, we're all nodding, we're all in lockstep, and now it's time to actually go and take action, focusing on the things that you're trying to fix. Technology is there to fix something. So just like you're asking the product to fix an issue, you have to have the team is going to focus on that product and the issue that it's challenging. You may need to tweak things along the way, but that's really where you need to focus, is on the problem that it is solving.
Yeah. And to me, like my experience has been that actually doing your research prior to investing in tech is a huge part of that. It's not enough just to bring on the new fancy thing, right? If it's not something that you actually need, kind of like do an analysis of your actual business and see where your needs are and fix those first, And again, like Bain, you and I have talked about that a little bit. If it's something that it's going to fix an immediate problem for you, that's more likely going to be the best tech for you at that time, as opposed to just kind of buying whatever's hot in the market right now. You're going to get much more adoption of the things that you've actually done your research and found that this is something that's going to benefit you in the short term.
100%.
Yeah. Ryan, in your experience, like working at brokers, what's been the responsibility of that customer side in terms of getting adoption of the product?
I think it's like anything. It takes time. It takes the desire that you guys mentioned. It takes the actual ultimate customer wanting that information and responding to their needs. So I think it's all of the things that these guys have just summed up and described. It takes all those bits and pieces, not just one thing, but it's definitely it's adoption of the, I don't know, maybe the learning curve, and then the desire to try to do it as well. It is really the way I see it.
Perfect. And Bain, I'm circling back to you on this one again. Do you think fear of technology plays a role? Is that something that inhibits adoption rates?
100%. I feel there is, and we see this with our clients, and I've seen this in my past lives. There is a fear of technology and the fact that, again, people fear they don't understand. So what is this technology doing? This is, again, we go back to why do we chain on the why? What does this do for you? How does it make your job simpler? How does it make you more effective? And how does it actually make you, because you are the expert on that technology? We'll use an operations rep as an example. If they suddenly have all this automation where they're able to pull in paperwork, they can quickly get it to their clients, they have visibility through some type of location provider, they are much more efficient at their job. They're not having to go and email and call and do all these different things. They're able to leverage technology. They're suddenly much more effective at their role. And by showing their effectiveness, they're actually getting themselves stickier at their job, and they can start to look at a career track where they're able to start moving up. So not everybody sort of thinks that way. And so it's getting, when you're starting with the training and the why, you're going to bring people along that journey that says, okay, this technology is going to reduce some of these simple tasks and allow you to do the more important ones the business is much more keen on, and that helps to stem that fear. There's always going to be that fear. There is going to be some folks that maybe have been in the industry a little longer that will probably take a little extra time and massaging to get over those fears. But again, looking across human history, technology leads to more jobs. It always has. It will reduce some others, but it's always led to more jobs. Period. Full stop.
Wholeheartedly agree. The example I usually use, I talk about this periodically, is electricity, right? Electricity wiped out a ton of jobs, but nobody's sitting around pissed that they can't be lamplighters anymore, right? Like, you don't have that segment of people who's just making rallies because they want to be a lamplighter again. It opened
Some
up.
Folks do want to light stuff on fire, though.
They do, but no, like, it opened up so many other jobs, and technology and transportation is going to do the same thing. Like, Chris, you've had a lot of transportation or experience in a bunch of different segments of transportation. Is this something that you've seen throughout your career, a fear of technology?
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, I mean, there's an innate fear of, hey, I don't understand this. But then, and this kind of goes back to selling through the organization. You know, certain segments of companies we find are immediately just positive about the benefits of the technology. And I'll use finance as an example. You know, as we engage with new clients, the finance team sees the clear benefit of having things automated and be able to produce robust reporting that just reduces the amount of work that they have to do on their side. Now, on the individual operator side, you know, I may have been somebody in a role who for the past 20, 25 years is just used to calling up a local terminal saying, hey, where's the driver? Or, hey, this picked up yesterday. Can you tell me where it is? And now you've got API connectivity in the LTL space, and there's not a need for that, right? So there's a little bit of protectionism, so to speak, on, okay, well, but if that gets taken away from me, what do I do? You know, what's that mean for me? And for us, it's always what that means is now you don't have to waste your time doing something like that because it's automated. You are still the face to your own organization, and you're just going to be somebody who is now that much more informed. You have that much more information, and you're going to add that much more value to your organization because you're going to be able to give them information a hell of a lot quicker than you could before when you had to go pound the phone and talk to, you know, Tony, the dispatcher at the local terminal.
I think that's a great point, Chris. It's about the value that you add within the organization. So the more you can use the technology to give you proactive ability, I think is huge.
Yeah, and I think this kind of ties in to what you were saying. One of my customers always mentions that like you should automate what sucks, right? Yeah. Like automate what sucks and let human beings do what they're best at, right? Human beings aren't best at aggregating huge amounts of data and drawing conclusions from that. You know, like they're good at building relationships and everything surrounding other like human interactions. So if you're trying to make people do things that they're just inherently not very good at, or just mundane tasks like data entry, like computers can do that. And computers aren't there to take that job away. They're there to do that because it's something that is going to let humans augment what they're actually going to exceed at. And I thought I had a question in the comments, but I don't. It's just Ryan talking and saying good point. So good point there. Moving on to my last question here, and this is just more broadly talking about the industry in general. What's interesting to you guys right now in the freight tech landscape? And Ryan, I'm going to guess text locate, but like maybe outside of that, we'll go one by one. Like what's cool to you guys right now? Bain, what do you think?
Definitely visibility is one because it is table stakes. It has been for a while. So whatever that visibility may be, whether it's going to be a text, whether it's going to be direct connection to ELDs, that's super interesting to me. And then looking at the full ecosystem, the connected ecosystem. So API technology, I'm super interested in watching how that actually plays out because a lot of folks were talking about it, not everybody's actually executing on it. So those are really, really interesting to me.
What about you, Chris? What's interesting to you right now?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of along the same vein in terms of visibility. I mean, I think everybody on this call, on this webinar right now understands the monumental issues that we see across the entire supply chain. And the only way that we're going to be able to solve some of these problems, you know, and of course, there's a supply demand component. So I don't think anybody on this call is going to be able to reprogram, you know, purchasing behavior here in North America. But seeing more visibility and more collaboration from port terminal operations in Asia, Southeast Asia, with the underlying carriers, you know, local port operations, with the intermodal folks, you know, in the truckload sector, and especially on the warehousing side, there just needs to be more of a need for everybody to be able to share information. Everybody loves receiving information, but people are a little hesitant to share that. So for me, it's all about visibility, because if we can connect everything together, then I think we can start to make a dent into some of these massive issues that we have. But without that, everything remaining siloed, then, you know, we could be in this really ugly cycle for a lot longer than necessary.
Yep, the connectivity of things is definitely an interesting thing going on right now in the world. Ryan, what are your thoughts here?
So from my perspective, obviously, I'm very excited about what Text Locate has to offer, and it's very focused on a niche market. But outside of that, I'm just excited about all the people that are really coming to the market. You talked before about the tech fear. some of the tech fear that we have right now is because logistics is cool. It has been for the past, like, call it 4 or 5 years. And it's almost to the point, like, for example, I had a customer the other day, pretty close, business relationship. Hey, we cannot look at something else right now. And I'm like, I really have made such a simple product. It takes just a few minutes. And they're like, we just need a breather because there's so many people bringing things. So that, I think that's a little bit of the fear, is there's a little bit of, drivers have app fatigue. I think everybody in general is having a little fatigue with the amount of technology, but it excites me because I think there's a lot of people out there building products like I'm building their niche. There's also people taking and moving products to the cloud from basically a server level. And it's just making the flexibility with the pieces that that these guys just talked about, making it easier, make it connected. There's a lot of things that are making the work from home process easier. And that work from home, we could get into a whole debate about that, whether it's at the office, at home, what's better, what's best. I think it depends on the person and the style business that you have. But just having the flexibility to be able to continue, if you do need to, get to a ball game or something like that, then you've got tools that are able to work remote with you, depending on what the situation are. So I think making that more effective. And then I really think that the more we can get tools that really do a good job in the freight logistics brokerage on optimization is going to be huge. And I know that's a really big task and it's very hard, but the efficiency and the capacity of is going to continue to get tighter and tighter over time. It just, we could go through, like, for example, it's extremely tight now. We're going to go through a seasonal effect or some kind of effect that it may not be as much. It's just kind of how the industry works. But the more we can be efficient with it, whether that's to help from the amount of hours that drivers have, being able to get, whether we fill a truckload full, or to higher capacity, the sustainability. I think sustainability is extremely hot right now. So I'm pretty passionate about what companies are starting to do and with the sustainability efforts, whether that be, again, more efficient trucks, electric trucks, all those things that are coming around are really exciting to me, and in technology that just makes it safer and easier for drivers as well.
Yeah, I think that, like, everything you said is right on line with what I think too. And I want to focus on, like, what you said about the app fatigue and how that there's a lot of stuff out there. And, like, I wholeheartedly agree. There's so much that it can be a little bit hard to cut through the noise sometimes. And, like, that was self-servingly part of our impetus for starting up Kinetic. But at the same time, like, it's a good problem to have. I would much rather have, like, all these people entering the industry and trying to improve it with their technology than have nothing happening and have everybody still using technology from the 80s. So kind of 6 in one, half and dozen in the other. But at the same time, like, it's better to have it this way than the other way. So not 6 in one, half and dozen in the other.
Yeah, I would agree. It's better that products are coming. You just got to prioritize which ones that makes sense to look at, and be open-minded, and for even short bursts to look at different pieces, which is one thing I really like about content and things like FreightWaves has done in the channels, is that you can get exposure. Like, for me, it was great to be able to get exposure of my product out of FreightWaves. So there's more content and availability between people's websites, the freemiumware, the YouTubes. You can somewhat do some of that investigating work on your own as well, and you can do it at off times, mornings, nights, weekends, kind of whenever, if you want to kind of hop in and look at something for 10 or 15 minutes. So tools that allow providers and people that are creating technology to get to somebody at odd hours and odd times is really a nice benefit.
Yeah. And let's see, we got about 6 minutes left, and we actually did have one question pop in here. Ryan, I think this was actually directed at something that you said earlier. So how do you measure the business value versus the low price of, I guess specifically Text Locate, but any product really?
Well, when we were building our product, we wanted to, it's something that is low hanging fruit that needed to solve. And there's a couple of ways that we looked at it. We looked at, how can we make a platform that is easy for somebody to get up and running, that you have a seat level person could get used to and using it today, and replacing an actual phone call? And then how do we connect in an API? And I think you've got to look at the market. What is the market willing to pay, and what's affordable, and how do you get it priced right to the value? Because sometimes people look at things and be like, oh, that's so inexpensive that it probably doesn't do much. But I think it depends on your model. It depends on your cost. It depends on how you can utilize the product to actually get value. There's a lot of tools. I mean, for example, I think LinkedIn being free is a significant value, and it's worth a lot. And I pay for a paid account to get a little bit more information. And it's very inexpensive, but there's a ton of value come from it. So don't think that you just got to pay a lot of money for value. The model's changed and the market's changed with what the products can meet. But at the same time, you can't overprice, or you'll get people won't take a look at the product. So it's a fine line. You just got to see how it makes sense best for your product.
Makes sense. All right, we are really close to time here, so I'm going to kind of wrap things up. To everybody attending this, thanks for attending. Panelists, again, thank you for being part of this. I think you guys offer some great insights. I had a great time talking to you guys today. And here, let's go through one by one. If you have any parting thoughts, you just want to let people know how to reach out to you. Bain, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I guess my only parting thought is going to be around just tech in general. Identify those few things that really matter to your organization when it comes to tech, whether it's going to be something like a just overall tech strategy, whether it's going to be new software you're looking at with possibly hardware, and make a concerted effort to understand where the industry is with that tech strategy and with that tech piece, and determine what your tolerance is for making investments. I think a lot of folks just talk about technology and talk about all the innovation and essentially get analysis by paralysis, or paralysis by analysis, I should say, and they do nothing. And that, unfortunately, is going to leave you the exact same spot you are a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, unless you decide to make a move and make a decision.
All right. Chris, any parting thoughts, how to reach out to you?
Yeah, I can be reached at my email address here, cpeckham@freightplus.io, on LinkedIn. And from my perspective, there's just an awful lot of information and stuff that's happening in the industry, right? And I think it's critical for somebody who is looking to invest in tech, really get a good feeling for what your strategic roadmap looks like. And then if you've identified a problem and you know internally what that roadmap looks like, then it's easier to sell to the powers that be internally on how this technology is going to help solve a specific problem. And it's also aligned internally with what you're trying to achieve from a corporate strategy standpoint. So again, we are definitely here to help in many different ways. So if any of you folks have any questions, need any follow-up, we've got some contact details here, and feel free to reach out.
All right. And last but not least, Ryan, parting thoughts, how to contact you?
Well, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Ryan at textlocate.com, obviously LinkedIn as well. And then our website, if you can go there, just textlocate.com, easy to find. If you got questions or anything I could help on, even outside of the business, experience-wise, different, logistics, brokerage, asset-based, whatever, I'm always willing, always able to help. Or if there's other products that you're interested in that I may have used in the past, happy to help with that as well. I think it's important to, when you do look at the products, some things you take a chance on. I hope that's me and TextLocate, but there are things that you probably should reach out and get a few references, so that what you're thinking about using it, using the product, make sure that you reach out and ask others how well it's working for them, and if they're having good results, and the way you think about using it, is anybody else using it that way, or can it be achieved? That probably helps a little bit as well.
All right, perfect. That's all we've got. So I'm going to wrap this up. I apologize at the beginning, user error. I did not get the slides up correctly, so they don't pop in until probably the first question or so. But regardless, we're going to have this up on our YouTube channel in the next few days here. We're going to send out the recording to anyone who registered and signed up. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for you guys to rewatch this if you want to. Again, thanks to the panelists, and thanks everybody for showing up.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Nick.